It's Argentina. It's Mexico. It's Poland. And it's Saudi Arabia. It's Group C. And it's the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor, and we will be doing a group-by-group preview in this series. This podcast is looking at Group C, made up of Argentina, Mexico, Poland, and Saudi Arabia.
Right, and this series will be followed by our next one, which is a team-by-team look at their players. Then shortly before the Cup, we'll be doing another podcast series with final updates on both teams and players.
So this series features a deep dive into the World Cup finals history of the teams. For a deeper dive still, you can check out any of the 9 podcast series we have done so far. Though we'll talk more about that at the end of the podcast.
Right, stay tuned at the end if you want more information on that. But let's look at the 3 sections that we're going to cover in this podcast.
So with part 1, we begin with a look at who is in the group, which pot they came from, their colors and nickname, and some geographical information about each country, comparing how big each country is in relation to the others in the group.
Right, and part 2 is the longest section, a team-by-team overview with a quick review of their participation and major achievements, an overview of their World and Regional Cup history, and for this series, a deep dive into their World Cup's final history. So we'll give particular attention at the end of each section to their recent tournaments and games.
Right, and then we end part 3 with a summary of each team and a sense of their current form as we lead into a comparison of the teams through their FIFA and ELO rankings, head-to-head meetings, and the odds on their success. This launches us into a discussion of their prospects and our predictions.
Right, and at the end, we'll again provide our address and the links so that those who want to delve into more history on the teams can check our previous podcasts. There is, by the way, a YouTube version of this and a podcast version. They are the same broadcast, but the YouTube version has simple graphics to follow while one listens along. So those can be found also in the show notes along with other information. Now, Connor, I am finally actually prepared shirt-wise for one of these groups. I have an Argentina shirt.
Very nice, very classic. I do not have a shirt for one of these teams, so I'm just wearing my UEFA shirt, which has the flags of all 54 UEFA members.
Oh, cool. Well, unlike when I wear a Canada shirt, I'm pretty honest about my biases. I'm not particularly a fan of Argentina, although I'm not against them either. I just happen to have the shirt, so that's why I'm wearing it.
Great.
All right, let's begin with part 1 and kind of an overview of each team. And we're going to start with Argentina.
Right, so Argentina are the pot 1 team. Their nickname is La Albiceleste, which means the white and sky blue, which is an obvious reference to both their flag and their jersey, which is the traditional white and sky blue stripes. As
right.
Kevin is demonstrating for our viewers.
I thought actually I was waiting for you to say La Selección because I thought that was their nickname.
I've heard both.
Oh, okay. Are we going to talk about where they're from within each pot?
Yeah, so Argentina was kind of from the middle of pot 1. They were the 4th ranked FIFA team at the time of the draw, so that puts them kind of from the middle of pot 1.
Right, because the first team was Qatar, so that would put them 5th in pot 1. All right, on to Mexico.
All right, Mexico, nicknamed El Tri, which is refers to the 3 colors of their flag, green, white, and red, and also their jerseys with the green shirt predominantly. And Mexico are the top-ranked team from Pot 2. So they were 9th in the world at the time of the draw. So they just missed out on Pot 1. So yeah, I can kind of by the rankings, I guess, the strongest Pot 2 team available.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay, on to Poland.
Poland are named the White and Reds or the Eagles, but I'm not going to try pronouncing either of those in Polish. Their jersey is white with red shorts, but they've also worn a white and red shirt recently. And they come from kind of near the bottom of Pot 3. So, 26 overall. So kind of, a mid-strength team from Pot 3.
Yeah, and I should say we tried to kind of pick the kind of typical jersey or something that, at least in my mind, that's how I see them. But actually, their jersey in the tournament may be different. But the main colors should be the same. On to Saudi Arabia for Pot 4.
All right, Saudi Arabia, the Pot 4 team. Their nickname is the Green Falcons or the Sons of the Desert. And as the nickname suggests, they wear green, which is the color of their flag. And they're from the middle of Pot 4. So not the weakest team in the tournament, but still the lowest ranked team in this group.
Right. Well, we can kind of judge the strength of the group based on where they're coming from in the pots. Of course, if they all come from the top of each pot, that makes it a pretty tough team. Any comments on, a pretty tough group. Any comments on this group, Connor?
I would say most of the teams are kind of in the middle of their pot, with the exception of Mexico. So you basically got two teams which are in the top 10 in the world. I think they're the only group that has that. So I guess that creates potentially a formidable top 2 at least.
Yeah, I don't know, though. We'll talk a bit later of whether I really see Mexico as the 9th strongest team in the world.
Yeah, the FIFA rankings, they're not perfect. Anyways, that's where they are in their pots, and we'll talk more about them later.
Exactly. Okay, well, let's move on to a bit of geography, and beginning with Argentina.
So Argentina is the 5th largest country competing at these finals in terms of area, at about 2.8 million square kilometers. And their population is 47 million people. So that's 11th largest of the 32 teams.
Right, and they're kind of toward the south part of South America. Okay, moving on to Mexico, which is in Central America, kind of between America and the continent of South America.
Yeah, they're also a large country, the 7th largest in this tournament at just under 2 million square kilometers. But they have the 3rd largest population, 128 million people. So huge country in terms of population. Their neighbors to the north, USA, are the largest population. So USA and Mexico are 2 of the top 3 in that regard.
Right. Okay. Well, on to Poland, which is kind of on the east side of Europe. It borders on the Ukraine to the west, and on Germany to the west, Ukraine to the east.
Yeah. So Poland is a mid-sized country, 300,000 square kilometers, so the 15th largest out of 32 in this tournament. And their population at 38 million is 13th overall. So middle in country.
Right. Okay. And finally to Saudi Arabia, which is in the Middle East, kind of between the African and the Asian continents.
Yeah, and it's quite a large country. It's 2.1 million square kilometers, which is the 6th largest in this tournament, and of 35 million people, which is 15th. So just on the upper half of countries in terms of population.
All right. Well, Connor has thrown quite a few numbers out, so let's just take a look in comparison. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah. So in terms of area, the size of the countries, you have the 5th, 6th, and 7th largest countries at this tournament, which are Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and Mexico, respectively, as well as Poland, who are also in the top half. So some bigger countries. And then in terms of population, Mexico stands out as the largest with 128 million people. And then after that, it's Argentina with 47. Poland 38, and Saudi Arabia 35 million. So I guess those three countries relatively similar.
Right, in population. Okay, well, that moves us on to part 2 of the podcast. And we're going to start with Argentina, their participation and achievements. Any guess when they played their first international game, Connor?
I think they're quite an old country, but I wouldn't know. I mean, before the first World Cup, so maybe 1910, 1920-ish.
Oh, okay, a bit earlier than that, in 1902. So they are one of the senior members of international soccer, having been involved in the World Cup from the beginning in 1930. However, they withdrew from 3 cups in a row in 1938, 1950, and 1954. In 1938, it was in protest of Eurocentrism and was understandable. They were upset not only at traveling to Italy in 1934 to play just a single game, but also that the 1938 World Cup was awarded to Europe, although there had been an agreement that it would alternate between Europe and South America. The reasons in 1950 and 1954 are less clear, but it seems to have more been an issue with Brazil, who hosted the 1950 Cup. It's a shame, though, that they didn't attend, since they were one of the best teams in the world. From 1958, they participated in the World Cup consistently. As far as the Copa America goes, their consistency since its beginning in 1916 has been impressive. They missed only 4 editions in 1938, and then in 1949 and 1953. This also was due to a conflict with the Brazilian Football Association. And finally, in 2001, where they thought it was unsafe to participate in Colombia.
As far as performance goes, the only World Cup they failed to qualify for was in 1970. Their success started in the first Cup with the second place finish. They are a world-class team, having been in the World Cup final 5 times and winning twice, in 1978 when they hosted and in 1986. In the Copa America, they have been in the final 26 out of the 39 times, having withdrawn from 4 of the competitions, and they've won 15 times. Having last won in 1993, at least up until recently, they were frustrated not to have earned more titles under their greatest player, Lionel Messi.
Right. Okay, well, on we go to a bit of a closer look at the World Cup history, although it's still an overview. Their history at the World Cup began well with a second-place finish in the inaugural 1930 Cup, which took place in Uruguay. But the road proved very rocky after that. As we saw, they withdrew from the next 3 Cups, despite it being a strong period for them in South American competition. When they finally got a chance to prove themselves on the world stage in 1958, they were humiliated with a 1-6 loss to Czechoslovakia and a group stage exit. They hit rock bottom in 1970, the only year they failed to qualify, but their fortunes improved from 1974. In fact, they qualified for every cup and passed the group stage every time since 1974, only failing to pass the group stage 1 time since. They finally hosted in 1978 and won their first title, and they won again in 1986 and took second place in 1990. In 2002, a stunning qualification campaign was followed by falling at the group stage for the only time in their modern history. And in 2014, they reached a final again after a 24-year wait, which delighted them because they were hoping to do such a thing with the great Lionel Messi on their team. 2014 was the 5th time in their final, but they lost to Germany for their 3rd second-place finish. All right, well, let's move on to a look at the World Cup finals in detail. So we've divided this into 5 parts because they have a fairly long history. And part 1 of 5 deals with 1930 to 1958.
All right.
So,
No, I was going to say, I'll let you start with part 1 there, Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Okay. The first World Cup was in neighbouring Uruguay, which gave them a good advantage. And they made the best of it with 3 wins in the group stage over France, Mexico, and Chile. Although there was a bit of suspicious activity with the game against France, which was whistled to a close 6 minutes early as Argentina was 1-0 up. They went on to crush USA 6-1, but they lost in the semi-final to host Uruguay. Okay, well, the 1934 Cup was in Italy and featured a format like the final stages of a modern cup from the round of 16 onwards. So it's a 16-team knockout. Argentina was paired with Sweden, and they took an early lead in both first and second half, Sweden equalizing in both cases. At 2-2, Sweden scored at 79 to win, and Argentina was out. That was a 6,000-mile round trip just to play one game, and it wasn't only them, but all 4 teams that came from outside of Europe. They also had complaints of Italy pilfering some of their best players who were playing for Italian clubs. On top of those grievances, FIFA broke their promise to alternate cups between Europe and the Americas when they declared France as the host of the 1938 World Cup. They withdrew in protest. This may have played into their withdrawal in 1950 and non-entry in 1954, but the reasons are actually unclear. It was a shame, though, because, as I've said, their strength in South American tournaments made it clear that they were among the best teams in the world. But they returned in 1958, the tournament ironically in Europe for the second time in a row, having been in Switzerland in 1954 and Sweden in 1958. They scored just 2 minutes into their opening game with West Germany. However, they lost 1-3 in that game to West Germany, and later were crushed 1-6 by Czechoslovakia, in the middle earning a win over Northern Ireland. But a very disappointing World Cup for them, finishing last in the group stage.
All right, I'll take a look at part 2, which was 1962 to 74. So 1962 was in Chile, and again opened with an early goal at 4 minutes against Bulgaria. That turned to be the only goal, and that win promised a good tournament. However, they lost to England and tied Hungary to finish 3rd in the group stage, tied on points with 2nd place England, but behind on goal difference. Another disappointment, as the hope for advantage of the cup being in South America dissolved into failure. They did better in 1966, despite the cup being in Europe. They beat Spain in the opener and then tied West Germany. A win over Switzerland earned them 2nd place, behind West Germany on goal difference. This paired them with host England in the quarterfinal. There they had a man sent off at the 35th minute for dissent. The German referee did not speak Spanish, but based the decision on the look on his face, that of the Argentinian players. Argentina held on with 10 men until England scored the only goal of the game at 79 minutes. Argentina failed to qualify for the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, but reached the 1974 Cup in Germany. They lost to an informed Poland in their opener, who they meet here, and tied Italy. However, a win over Haiti in the 3rd game saw them finish tied on points for 2nd place with Italy. This time, goal difference worked in their favor as they advanced, knocking out Italy, who had reached the finals of the previous cup. The format of was a second group stage for this cup, but they performed poorly, losing 0-4 to Netherlands, who, although they were a weak team in the past, were taking this cup by storm. They also lost to Brazil and were out after 2, their 3rd game a meaningless draw with East Germany, who also had no chance of advancing.
All right, great. Well, just before we move on to part 3, Connor, I want to make a correction on something I said for the 1930 World Cup. So I had said they lost in the semi-final to Uruguay. They actually lost in the final after beating USA 6-1 in the semi-final. So just in case we were going to get in trouble for that.
Very good.
All right. Well, part 3 of 5 deals with 1978 to 1986. So after a history of disappointment, hosting the Cup in 1978 offered them an opportunity. They faced Hungary in the opener and exchanged quick goals early on. They won on a goal at 83 and beat France by the same score, 2-1, in the following game. They lost to Italy. They lost to Italy and advanced in second to the group stage. Again, a second group stage was the format this year, and they won their first game. Mario Kempes, is that a familiar name to you, Connor?
Fortunately not, no.
Oh, okay. Well, he was kind of their bigger star in the 1978 World Cup, and he scored both goals in that first game, a 2-0 win. They tied Brazil scoreless in the second game and faced Peru in the third, and they needed to win by a 4-goal margin to take first place over Brazil. A bit of suspicion surrounds the game, particularly the Argentina-born Peruvian goalkeeper, as the defense, who had been proven strong to that point, allowed 6 goals. Regardless, they reached the final to meet Netherlands, continuing their success, the Netherlands, with their total football system. Argentina scored at 38, but the Netherlands equalized at 82, and the game went to extra time, where Argentina scored twice. Mario Kempes, again the hero. Well, Spain 1982 is a disappointing follow-up to their first title. They lost to Belgium in the opener, but then beat Hungary and El Salvador to advance. In the 3-team second round, though, they lost to both Italy and Brazil. Mario Kempes was 32 by this point and made little impact, but a young Diego Maradona, have you heard of him, Connor?
Yeah, I wonder what happened to him.
Well, okay, I'll just continue on. A young Diego Maradona made an impression with 2 goals, but perhaps made more of an impression with a red card for kicking a Brazilian player in anger. 1986 was in Mexico, and Argentina finished first in the group stage ahead of defending champions Italy, who they tied, wins over South Korea and Bulgaria, seeing them through. After a 1-0 win over Uruguay in the round of 16, they went on to a famous quarterfinal match against England. It featured Diego Maradona at his best and at his worst. A devious header, which he couldn't quite reach, so effectively punched it in, was their first goal. He later said the goal was scored with a bit of the head, and a bit with the hand. Oh, sorry, a bit of the. I'm going to just try that again. A bit with the head of Maradona and another bit with the hand of God. So it was called, after that, the Hand of God goal. The second goal, just 5 minutes later, was a stunning run from his own half, weaving through the defence of England, and that one was dubbed the goal of the century.
Oh,
Are you
yeah,
familiar with
definitely.
those goals? Yeah, seen them time and time again on replays. Maradona also scored both goals in the following game, a 2-0 win over Belgium. That was in the semi-final. And though he didn't score any of their 3 goals in the final, Argentina went on to victory over West Germany, scoring the winner at 83 for their second title.
All right. I'll take us through part 4, which is 1990 to 2002. So in 1990 in Italy, they suffered a shock loss to Cameroon in their opener, but beat USSR and tied Romania to finish third in the group stage. They advanced nevertheless and went on to reach the final, beating Brazil 1-0, Yugoslavia and Italy both in penalty shootouts, and again meeting West Germany in the final, which is considered one of the ugliest games ever seen in a World Cup. There were several questionable penalty decisions, denying at least 1 clear penalty to each team. Argentina received 2 red cards, 1 direct to red in the game, the first red cards that were ever shown in a final. The penalty awarded to West Germany 6 minutes before the end of time was highly controversial, and the scene after the game was chaos. I believe that game finished 3-2. Is that correct?
I'll check it while you continue on, and I'll answer you after 1994.
Sure. So 1994, Argentina won their first two games over Greece and Nigeria. Diego Maradona had scored one of the goals against Greece, but was sent home after game 2 for testing positive for drugs.
Naughty boy.
Yeah. Argentina lost the third game to Bulgaria, leading to a complicated table. 3 teams tied with 6 points each. Nigeria went through first on goal difference, but Argentina and Bulgaria were tied on that count and on goals, both with 6-4 and 3 against. Bulgaria advanced in second, having won the head-to-head match, but Argentina advanced in third place just as they had in 1990. They met an informed Romania in the round of 16 and lost 2-3.
All right. Well, getting back to that 1990 final, the score was actually 1-0. So that final penalty to West Germany was the only goal of the game.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'll pick it up then in 1998, which saw them win all group stage games over Japan, Jamaica, and Croatia. The first 10 minutes saw each side score a penalty in the following round, but England took the lead for a second time with 19-year-old Michael Owen scoring on a great run at 16 minutes. Argentina equalized just before the halftime whistle. Early in the second half at 47 minutes, David Beckham got a red card for a petulant but fairly minor reaction to a rough tackle on him. The 10 men of England held though, and no goals were scored in the second half or in extra time. Argentina won 4-3 on penalties, and England were famously criticized for not having practiced them. In a replay of the 1978 final, Argentina met Netherlands in the quarterfinals and fell on a late goal at 89 minutes. The 2002 World Cup was a disaster. Argentina won their opener against Nigeria, but lost to England and tied Sweden. No drama with England in the yawner of a game, but a late equalizer against Switzerland, did prove dramatic. It meant for Argentina another third-place finish in the group stage, and this time it was not an advancing spot.
All right, so 2002, a poor tournament. We move on to part 5 of 5, 2006 to 2014. So Germany 2006 was better for them, with wins over Ivory Coast as well as Serbia and Montenegro, followed by a goalless draw with the Netherlands. That another game set up with much historical drama that turned out to be a pretty dull affair. Anyway, they finished first place in the group stage, and they met Mexico in the round of 16. And in one of the best goals of the Cup, Maxi Rodriguez scored a beautiful extra time winner, chest trapping and lobbing in a goal from the outside of the box. Do you remember that one?
I do, yeah. I remember that World Cup.
Yeah. Anyway, things looked good against Germany in the quarterfinals when the hosts seemed unable to find an equalizer. But Germany did score at 80, and the match eventually went to penalties, where Argentina lost on penalties. So the game ended with another scuffle with Germany, but the home team won and knocked them out. Okay, on to South Africa 2010, and they were grouped with Nigeria and Greece as they had been in 1994. They once again beat them both, as well as South Korea, for a comfortable first-place finish. They met Mexico once again in the round of 16, and they won that game. But once again, they fell to Germany in the quarterfinal, thrashed 0-4 this time. Brazil 2014 saw them winning all games all the way to the final. They met Nigeria for the 4th time at the group stage, and Lionel Messi turned on the magic for an injury time winner against Iran. The other team they beat was Bosnia-Herzegovina. The round of 16 went scoreless with Switzerland and seemed headed for penalties until Argentina scored at 118 minutes.
Wow.
Switzerland hit the post in their desperate search for an equalizer. So a great ending to the game there. But they got through, and after a 1-0 win over Belgium, they faced Netherlands. Again, the promising matchup went scoreless, and Argentina won on penalties to face Germany in the final for a record third time, having exchanged wins in 1986 and 1990. That too went scoreless in regulation time, but Germany won on one of the loveliest goals in World Cup history in extra time.
Yeah, Mario Götze.
Yes, that is right. A lovely cross and a nice finish. Okay, well, that brings an end to their detailed history. But now we're going to look at their recent history and take a look at the World Cup 2018 tournament.
So yeah, Argentina had a drama-filled qualification, which included political and organizational problems within their FA, or Football Association, which caused star Lionel Messi to quit the team temporarily in frustration. It started poorly with a shock loss at home to Ecuador, and continued. Argentina went winless in their first 3 games, plunging them into 9th spot. 4 wins in a row, however, saw them in first place by Game 7. A poor road run, winless in 5, saw them in 6th up to the last game. And it was a crucial road win in Ecuador in the final game, where Messi scored a hat trick and all 3 goals that saw them through. That moved them up to 3rd place in an automatic qualifying spot. Drama continued into the World Cup itself with a draw against Iceland in their opener, then a humiliating 0-3 defeat at the hands of Croatia. However, a late winner, a desperate winner at the 86th minute against Nigeria saw them through, finishing 2nd in the group stage. However, they lost to eventual champions France in a thrilling round of 16 game, where they led shortly after halftime, 3-1, but suffered 3 goals that ended their troubled tournament, and losing that game 4-3.
Right, and that game also, I think, had the goal of the tournament by Benjamin Pavard. I can't bring that goal to mind, though, even though it was fairly recently. Do you remember it?
Yeah, it was a kind of a sweet strike of a bouncing ball that just bent into the far corner. Lovely goal.
Nice. Okay, well, the round of 16 there for Argentina, probably a bit of a disappointment there in 2018. Let's move on to see how they did in World Cup 2022 qualifying.
So Argentina had a very strong qualification, going undefeated. They nevertheless finished 2nd in the large qualifying group, 5 points behind Brazil. The only team they tied twice was Paraguay.
Wow.
The qualification round is actually not over. Brazil and Argentina still have to play their game in Brazil, which is kind of comical because they're both already in the tournament, and it would have no impact on the standings.
Well, even more comical is why it happened.
Yeah, so that game started, but a few minutes in, it was brought to a close by Brazilian health officials, who said that some of the Argentinians violated COVID protocols. So the game was suspended barely after it began.
Yeah, I was expecting a phone call from the Brazilian FA asking me not to tell this story, but I'm just going to ignore it and go ahead.
All right.
Okay, yes, I have an image of those Brazilian health officials storming onto the field. Apparently, it was the players who were playing, who had traveled over from England, that were the ones who had violated the protocols.
That's right.
Okay, let's move on then to an overview of the Copa America history. That tournament's more than 100 years old, so we're certainly not going to go through every edition. Strangely, the mid-70s to the mid-80s was that's when they won their 2 World Cups, but it was their weakest period in the Copa America history. They were knocked out of the group stage for 3 cups in a row from 1975 to 1983. And actually, after 1959, they didn't reach the final again until 1991, at which point they won 2 Copa Americas in a row. However, they had not won Copa America since 1993, which increasingly grated on their nerves, especially because they wanted to justify Lionel Messi's role on the team in the last 10 years. And they were very frustrated not reaching it. It took until 2004 even just to reach the final again. But then they suffered 4 second-place finishes over the next 5 cups as they furiously tried to get Messi a title. The only final they didn't reach was in 2011, ironically, when their hopes were highest because they were tournament hopes. But we'll see over the most recent 2 cups whether they were finally able to get a title for Messi.
So for the 2019 Copa America, Argentina struggled throughout, losing to Colombia and tying Paraguay before beating Qatar to finish second in the group stage. They looked unified against Venezuela in the quarterfinal, but lost to host Brazil in the semis. They took third place with a win over Chile, where the legendary Messi took a coincidental red card in a shoving match with Chilean captain Gary Medel.
Gary Medel, he's very special to us, right, Connor?
Yeah, former Cardiff City player.
That's right. Okay, well, let's move on to 2021 and see if they finally got a title for Messi.
So this tournament started with the draw against Chile, but they won over Uruguay, Paraguay, and Bolivia to finish first in a new look 5-team group stage. They then beat Ecuador in the quarterfinals. Ecuador actually played very well, but were a no match for a well-performing Argentina, where Lionel Messi was in top form. In the semifinals, they met Colombia, who they beat on penalties to reach the final, where they finally won by a single goal over host Brazil, earning their first title since 1993, and a much-wanted title to mark the era of Lionel Messi, who actually performed well throughout this tournament.
All right. Well, I think that is going to be significant in our discussion of Argentina's chances in this cup later on. But we will save that discussion till the end and move on to look at their recent and upcoming games. And usually you handle this, but I'll just begin by asking whether you know what this CONMEBOL UEFA Finalissimo is, Connor.
Yeah, I did hear about it, but do you want to explain it or do you want me to?
No, if you know, you go ahead.
So this was a match played at Wembley Stadium in London between the winners of the most recent European Championship and Copa America. So that was Argentina and Italy. And that match was won by Argentina 3-0. So very convincing. So yeah, this might be a one-off. I think it was the first time it was held. But
yeah, I've never heard of it before. I was really kind of taken by surprise.
Yeah, a glorified friendly, I believe is how you.
Yeah, a friendly that probably makes a lot of money because I think the top players did play in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. Even though it didn't take place in either of those countries, and then since then they've really had one other friendly. That was against less illustrious opposition. They beat Estonia 5-0.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd friendly, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, coming up, they do have to play that World Cup qualifier with Brazil, but it doesn't mean much. I mean, they can't even overtake Brazil, so they've locked first and second place, but they have to play it to have it played. Otherwise, they don't have any games lined up, although I guess maybe in our update in October, maybe they will have a few games lined up by then.
Yeah, and then in terms of their schedule at the World Cup, Argentina open against Saudi Arabia and then play Mexico and finish with Poland.
All right, well, we'll talk at the end if we feel there's any significance in the order of games there. But it's time to move on to Mexico. Any guess when their first game would have been?
I bet it's probably around the same time as Argentina, turn of the century.
Yeah, I actually think it was mostly English people bringing the game around the world. Maybe there's a bigger population of English people in Argentina than in Central America, but they were about 20 years later in 1923. Nevertheless, they are a senior team in the world. having participated in that 1930 World Cup and in every World Cup since, except for two, in 1938 when they withdrew and in 1990 when they were disqualified. The regional tournament, including Central and North American teams, as well as Caribbean teams, was known as the CONCACAF Championship from 1963 to 1989. And from 1974, it acted as the qualifying tournament for the World Cups until 1990. So they participated in that from the beginning. However, they didn't enter in 1985. That was because they were hosting the World Cup in 1986, and they were banned from the CONCACAF Championship in 1989. Their regional tournament became the Gold Cup in 1991, and they have never failed to participate in that. We won't look at their Copa America and Confederation Cup histories in this podcast. They've played quite a few games or tournaments of the Copa America, but they're not allowed to anymore. But it can be reviewed in the podcast that we did for the 2021 Gold Cup.
Reaching the final is no great achievement for El Tri. Apart from their withdrawal in 1938 and the disqualification in 1990, they failed to qualify only 3 times. This was in 1934, 1974, and 1982. Their best finish in the Cup is the quarterfinals, both times they hosted, in 1970 and in 1986. In regional competition, they failed to pass the group stage when the tournament was not a round robin in 1963, but when it was a round robin, which was for most of the tournaments until 1989, their worst finish was 4th. Meanwhile, they've won the regional title 11 times and 4 of the last 7 editions of the Gold Cup since 2009.
All right. Well, I'm going to pose a little puzzle for you here, Connor. You said that they hosted twice in 1970 and 1986. And I think it's just 2 other countries that have hosted twice. And shall I ask you at the end of the World Cup review?
I can take my guesses now if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna give our listeners time to think about it. So
okay, pose it to me again. I will think about it
if I remember. Okay, let's move on to the World Cup overview. And Mexico regularly qualifies for the World Cup, as Connor pointed out. As mentioned above, also, they were disqualified in 1990. The reason being that they fielded overaged players for a youth tournament, actually forging birth certificates of certain players. In the early years, they were invariably knocked out at the group stage of the World Cup. They reached the quarterfinal in 1970 and then again in 1986, aided by being the host in both cases. Well, I might as well ask you now then, Connor.
I think it is France and Brazil.
Oh my God. I was thinking Germany and Italy. So it looks like there are 5 countries that have hosted twice.
All right. Well, I'll check our stats while you carry on.
Okay. All right. Well, in between 1970 and 86, they had their worst spell, failing to qualify twice and getting knocked out at the group stage in 1978. And then after being disqualified in 1990, they both reached and have been stopped. They both reached and have been stopped at the round of 16. And that's been the case every cup since 1994. Now that it's 7 cups in a row, it's actually becoming a note of comedy. All right, moving on to the World Cup finals in detail. So we've divided Mexico into 4 parts. And the first part is the early years, 1930 to 1958. So Uruguay saw the cup closer to home for Mexico compared to most non-South American teams, but it didn't offer them an advantage. They lost to France 1-4, to Chile 0-3, and to Argentina 3-6, scored on in each game first before the 20th minute. The goal scored by France at 19 actually was the first ever goal scored in World Cup history. In 1934 Italy World Cup, they were poorly treated. They won the qualification round over Cuba and then traveled to France by boat to France, only to find that USA's late entry had been accepted and they were required to play a playoff qualification game against USA in Rome. They lost that game and found themselves out of the World Cup that they had qualified for and that they had taken the trouble to travel to. So perhaps it was for that reason, in anger over that they withdrew in 1938. 1950 saw them again losing all three games in the group stage. Brazil, Yugoslavia, and Switzerland all finished ahead. They scored 2 goals, both at 89 in games that were already lost. It was not dissimilar in 1954 Switzerland. That tournament had an odd group stage. It was a group of 4, but teams only played 2 of the other teams. In Mexico's case, they suffered a 0-5 loss to Brazil, and in their most competitive game yet, a 2-3 loss to France. There they equalized at 85 to make the score 2-2, but on the verge of getting their first World Cup point, France was awarded a penalty at 88 and beat them. The Cup was in Sweden in 1958 and they lost to the hosts 0-3 in their opener. But in the next game, their 10th World Cup game, they earned a draw against Wales for their first World Cup point. But after that, they lost 0-4 to Hungary and finished last in the group stage. 1962 Chile was a bit better and certainly more competitive. They lost 0-2 to Brazil in their opener, but they held Spain scoreless until losing on a goal at 90. It looked grim when Czechoslovakia scored on them a minute into the third game, but they came back with goals at 12 minutes and 29 minutes and made it 3-1 with a penalty at 90 for their first World Cup win. However, they finished a point behind Czechoslovakia in the group in third place and didn't advance.
1966 in England saw Mexico draw twice with France and Uruguay. In between, they lost 0-2 to host England for another third place finish in the group stage. In 1970, Mexico hosted and went undefeated through the group stage. It was a scoreless draw with USSR, a big 4-0 win over El Salvador, and a 1-0 win over Belgium. The quarterfinal looked promising when they scored at 13 minutes to take a lead over Italy. However, they scored an own goal after that. It remained tied until the 63rd minute when Italy scored their first of 3 quick goals, and by 76 minutes it was all over, a 1-4 loss. Mexico failed to qualify for Germany in 1974, but returned to Argentina in 1978. There they lost all group stage games in a poor showing. 1-3 losses to Tunisia and Poland, sandwiched by a 0-6 loss to West Germany. They failed to qualify again in 1982, but hosted the Cup in 1986, taking over the duties when Colombia proved incapable. They beat Belgium 2-1 in the opener, but tied Paraguay in Game 2. A 1-0 win over Iraq secured first place in the group. They had little trouble with a 2-0 win over Bulgaria in the round of 16 and faced West Germany once again in the quarterfinals. They kept that scoreless through to a penalty shootout, which they lost 1-4, scoring the first penalty but missing the next 2.
All right. Well, that moves us on to part 3 of 4, which covers 1990 to 2002. So 1990 actually saw them disqualified for the reasons that we talked about above. And 1994 took place next door USA. They lost to Norway in their opener, losing on the only goal of the game at 85. But they came back to beat Ireland and then did well to tie Italy. All four teams finished tied on points and on goal difference, but Mexico took first on the basis of most goals scored. They went on to face Bulgaria, who they had managed easily in 1986. But this was a special generation for Bulgaria, featuring Hristo Stoichkov, and the game finished 1-1. It went to penalties, and both teams missed their first shots. But Mexico went on to miss their first 3, and they were out in the round of 16, which would become a very familiar exit gate for them. In 1998 France, they went undefeated through the group stage, beating South Korea and tying Belgium and the Netherlands, but they lost to Germany in the round of 16. They were stationed in Japan for the 2002 South Korea-Japan World Cup, where they once again went undefeated, finishing convincingly in first with wins over Croatia, then Ecuador, and once again a third group stage tie with Italy. They traveled to South Korea for their round of 16 matchup with the USA, and though they fully deserved a win, they lost 0-2 to their local rivals. On to part 4 of 4. Connor?
All right, so that begins in 2006 in Germany, where Mexico started with the win over Iran, who played well, but became defensive towards the end, Mexico taking advantage with goals at 76 and 79. Angola was likely a game they expected to win, but it ended in a goalless draw. They lost to Portugal in the third, all goals scored by 29 minutes, and Mexico seemingly lacking the desire to win. However, both those teams went through, Mexico in second, and they met Argentina in the round of 16. That turned out to be arguably the best game of the Cup, starting with early goals for both teams, but then going to extra time where Argentina won on one of the nicest goals of the Cup, which we talked about. 2010 in South Africa saw them with a 1-1-1 record, tying host South Africa in the opening game of the tournament, beating a disappointing France, and losing to Uruguay, who they finished in second place behind. This round of 16 loss was again to Argentina, whose first goal came on a play that was clearly offside. Upset with the call, Mexico gave up a goal on a poor defensive mistake 7 minutes later, all but ending the game. 2014 saw Mexico finishing second to Brazil in the group stage, who they tied, and then beating Cameroon and Croatia. Both wins featured harsh decisions against them. 2 valid goals disallowed against Cameroon and 2 valid penalty shouts not given against Croatia, but they won both. Goalkeeper Guillermo Ochoa gave one of the outstanding goalkeeping performances of the Cup in their 0-0 draw with host Brazil. They were also hard done by in the round of 16 game with Netherlands. They were leading at 88 minutes but gave up a late equalizer. In extra time, Netherlands was awarded a penalty on a clear dive, Dutch player Arjen Robben later even admitting to it, and Mexico were out at the round of 16
Do you
again.
remember that one? I was infuriated.
Are you still infuriated?
I think I'm still feeling it. I'm traumatized and haven't recovered.
Yeah, I do remember that. And I remember your reaction to it as well. But it was unfair.
Sounds like you were traumatized by my reaction. Let's move on to the World Cup 2018, where we'll also look at their qualifying.
All right. So in qualifying for the 2018 World Cup in Russia, Mexico was one of the top 6 ranked teams in CONCACAF to get a bye straight through to the round 4 or 5 group stage. They comfortably won that group, winning all games except for a tie at home to Honduras. But El Salvador and Canada were the 2 other teams that didn't advance.
Ouch.
Yeah. In the Hex, Mexico similarly cruised the top spot, suffering only a home draw with USA and away ties in Panama and Costa Rica, until the last game where they again gave up points to Honduras again. That was their only loss, but resulted in Honduras advancing at the expense of USA, who were shocked out of the Cup. They started hot in the tournament, beating a poorly performing Germany and then South Korea, but came close to not advancing when they lost heavily to Sweden. South Korea's win over Germany giving them second place in the group stage.
All right, and it carries on, I think.
Yeah, so their tournament ended in the next round when they were foiled, as they so often are, by both Brazil, who beat them 2-0, and the round of 16.
Foiled by the round of 16. I wonder what will happen this cup. Okay, let's move on to 2022 qualifying.
All right, so they were one of 5 teams to questionably receive a bye to the final round of qualification in a system that was blatantly unfair before COVID caused some changes to improve it somewhat when it was expanded from 16 hex to 8 teams. They were bested by Canada. We were at that game in Edmonton.
Yay!
Sub-zero temperatures where Canada won.
Well, why not have it in the north, up here?
Yeah, freeze the Mexicans. Well, they froze the Canadians too, to be fair. Nevertheless, Mexico finished behind Canada, but were second of 8 in the final round of qualifying. They were also bested by the USA, but their better consistency against the other teams in the group, suffering only a tie in Panama and a home tie with Costa Rica, saw them leapfrog USA in their last game.
Right. Okay. Well, good for Canada there. That's one we'll remember for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, both Mexico and Canada in the cup. Let's take a shorter look at the CONCACAF Championship Gold Cup history. So we'll just be doing an overview for that one. So Mexico has always been a power in the regional cup from its start in 1963. Though always near the top, they didn't win the region as much as one would expect, having done so only 3 in 11 times up until 1991. Costa Rica also had 3 regional titles, but was never really a rival, having never reached the World Cup, never beaten Mexico out for the World Cup. In fact, there really was no main rival until that time. But in 1990, the USA became a force, winning the first Gold Cup in 1991. That's when the title of the cup was changed from the CONCACAF Championship to the Gold Cup. So both the Mexico and USA have since ruled the region, winning every Gold Cup between them, except for 2000, where somebody else won, but it's kind of, can you help me out here?
That was Canada's title.
Oh, yes, it was. Yeah, 2000, when Canada kind of interrupted Canada won. But even in the 1990s, the dominant Mexico dominated with 3 straight titles from 1993 to 1998. Since 2002, the title has pendulumed regularly back and forth between the two with almost clockwork regularity.
That's right. Yeah, Mexico and U.S. exchanging wins.
That's right. And right now, well, we'll see who holds the title. We're going to cover 2 of the recent tournaments here, beginning with the 2019 Gold Cup.
So although several top players did not participate, Mexico won all games to earn their 8th title. They beat Cuba, Canada, and Martinique to finish first in the group stage, but then required penalties to pass Costa Rica in the quarterfinal. Mexico also beat Haiti in extra time. Haiti was a real surprise of that tournament. They beat Haiti in the semifinals. And then in the final, Mexico met and beat host USA. Mexico deservedly won the final on a single goal in the 73rd minute, though they were actually more dominant than that score suggests.
Yeah, that quarterfinal with Costa Rica was probably the best game of the cup. With shots off the woodwork and questionable penalty decision and a great save in extra time. And it went to penalties as well. So couldn't ask for more than that. Great. Okay, well, let's move on to 2021.
All right, so Mexico won all 4 games over Panama and Bermuda in the 2019-20 CONCACAF Nations League to finish atop that group and qualify them for the Cup. But the tournament got off to a poor start with a goalless draw against Trinidad and Tobago. But they then beat Guatemala convincingly and El Salvador less so to finish first in the qualifying group. They easily beat a Honduras team ravaged by injuries and COVID dropouts, but struggled with Canada. requiring a goal deep into injury time to beat them.
Oof.
Yeah. In the final, Mexico failed to capitalize on their early dominance against the United States, and the game seemed a stalemate at 0-0, destined to go to penalties until the USA snatched the win and the title on a late goal themselves, this goal coming at the 117th minute.
Great. Well, one of the things I'm thinking is that it's good finally to have a qualification for, Mexico, Canada, and USA for this cup. It seems unfair, as much as I hate to say it, but kind of unfair that Canada got a bye into the cup, whereas the Central American and Caribbean teams had to go through a qualification process.
Yeah, I think the Nations League will be good for the region overall.
Yeah, and good for Canada because, frankly, even though we did get a bye into the Gold Cup, we didn't get the practice games that we really needed. All right, well, no, wait, there has been some qualification games for the 2023 Gold Cup, just a couple, but do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, these are Nations League game. It's a 3-team group. Mexico is paired with Suriname and Jamaica. They beat Suriname, but then tied in Jamaica. So they have 2 games left to play. But I believe the top 2 qualify, so they're really in no danger of not qualifying for the Gold Cup.
Yeah, in League A, I think you're right. I think the top 2 qualify and the third one goes to a playoff. But basically, we're kind of looking at them the way we're looking at their friendlies here, just kind of recent games that they've played. And they played those games along with some friendlies. Do you want to tell us how they've done?
Yeah, they had a host of friendlies from April till June of this year, all played at home. Kind of some middling results. They tied Guatemala and Ecuador, both 0-0, beat Nigeria, but then lost heavily 3-0 to Uruguay. Then they've had those 2 Nations League games, which also saw a draw in Mexico. So, probably not tip-top form, but they'll have some more friendlies lined up before the World Cup starts.
Well, it's very interesting to see that all of those friendlies you talked about are in Mexico, and all of the friendlies that they've lined up so far are also in Mexico. Do you think it's wise to have all of their pre-tournament games at home?
I think probably good to mix it up, to play in some different regions. I mean, especially for a cup that's taking place in the unfamiliar territory of Qatar.
Yeah, I kind of worry about that. But how about the World Cup schedule? What does it look like?
So Mexico will play Poland first, so that's the pot 2 and pot 3 teams meeting. Then they play Argentina in their second game and finish against Saudi Arabia.
Okay. All right, well, on we go to Poland. And we'll begin with a look at their participation and achievements. Is it bothering you that I'm asking you to guess when they played their first game?
Well, I haven't been successful so far, so maybe you can give it to me.
All right, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It is 1921. Poland participated in the 1938 World Cup, but then withdrew, joining again in 1958 and participating consistently since then. They've entered every Euro Cup since its beginning in 1960.
Well, Poland had a strong period in the World Cup from the mid-70s to early 80s, finishing third in both 1974 and 1982. I actually didn't realize that, but that's quite impressive.
Yeah.
This is reflected in Euro Cups only by almost qualifying for the finals. They otherwise had a minor peak in the first decade of the millennium, but since then, and arguably even during that period, they've been a little bit unimpressive. They seem to be in the midst of a third peak now, but unlike their strength in the 70s, this and the peak around 2000 are defined by more consistent qualifications rather than by impressive tournament results.
All right. Well, we'll be looking at their World Cup history, so that'll shed some light for you, and we'll move on to a kind of an overview of the World Cup before we get into the details of the finals. They withdrew, as we said, from the World Cup in 1934 Sorry, I think I said above that it was 38, but it was 1934. And they did participate in 1938, where they lost their single game. We described that round of 16 knockout format. They lost their single game. It was a famous loss to Brazil in a game where Poland scored late to equalize at 4-4, and which Brazil won 6-5 in extra time. After that, they failed to qualify until 1978. No, sorry, until 1974. And as Connor said, 1974 began a strong period where they reached 4 cups in a row, not only passing the group stage every time, but going undefeated for the first 11 of their 12 group stage games. They advanced every time, and as Connor said, finished twice in third place in 1974 and 1982. So we've divided their World Cup finals history into 3 parts, and part 1 deals with the pre-war era. So a bit of a closer look at what I just said there. After withdrawing from the 1934 World Cup during qualification, they successfully reached the 1938 World Cup in France. And as mentioned, the structure of the Cup was basically the current format from the round of 16 onwards. So they lost in their first game to Brazil and they were out. But it was a spectacular game, and I'll go into a bit more detail here. Brazil went into halftime 3-1 up, but Poland's Ernest Wilimowski scored at 52 and 59 to equalize. And then, after Brazil regained the lead at 71, Wilimowski made it a hat-trick with a tying goal at 89 to send the 4-4 game into extra time. There, Brazil's famous Leonidas scored the second goal of his hat-trick at 93 to once again regain the lead, and then he completed the hat-trick with a goal at 104. Wilimowski actually scored his 4th goal at 118. He became the first player to score 4 goals in a game, but it was not enough for Poland, and they were out, losing 5-6 in extra time.
So part two,
sorry.
Yeah, this covers Poland's strong period. So it took until 1974 in Germany to reach the cup again. It was an impressive start with goals just 7 and 8, minutes in for a win over Argentina, a 7-0 demolition of Haiti, and a 2-1 win over previous cup finalist Italy. That brought them to a second group stage where they won over Sweden. A loss to Germany in the third game saw West Germany win the group and advance to the final. Second place meant a third place match for Poland, who faced Brazil, and they won for a third place finish. In 1978, Poland started with a match against West Germany, which went scoreless. However, they beat Tunisia and Mexico to finish first in the group. In the second group stage, they faced all South American teams, losing to host Argentina and to Brazil, but winning over Peru to finish third ahead of them. Spain 1982 saw Poland undefeated in the group stage for the third cup in a row. Goalless draws with Italy and Cameroon were followed with a 5-1 win over Peru. That game went scoreless until 55 minutes when Poland started a 21-minute bombardment of 5 goals by 5 different players. Again, it advanced them to the second group stage, though this time it was a 3-team group. Poland's Zbigniew Boniek scored a hat-trick in their 2-0 win over Belgium, 3-0 win over Belgium, and it was a scoreless draw with USSR to finish first in the group, which brought them to a semi-final. There they lost to Italy, but beat France with another bombardment of goals at 40-44, and immediately after the halftime break at 46 to win 3-2. So that saw them finish in third place in that World Cup. In 1986, they would see the embers of their strong period. After a scoreless tie with Morocco and a 1-0 win over Portugal, they lost their first ever group stage match to England by a score of 0-3. They went on to the round of 16 where they lost 0-4 to Brazil, and it would be 16 years before Poland reached the cup again.
Right. Well, what do you think about the strong period, Connor?
Very impressed. I actually didn't realize that they were such a strong nation at that time, including in the days of the mighty Netherlands and Argentina and Germany. So, yeah, 2 third-place finishes is very impressive.
Yeah, and that 11 out of 12 wins in the group stage is pretty impressive. Actually, I got to say that the name Boniek does kind of stick in my head, and I think he became kind of a favorite of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to part 3 of 3, and that just covers 2002 to, well, we'll say 2014. So in 2002, the Cup was in South Korea and Japan, and they were stationed in South Korea, and their first game was with the host. So possibly the first game of the tournament there, I'd have to check. Usually the host plays the first game. Anyway, they lost 0-4 to Portugal so they lost to South Korea, just in case I didn't make that clear. And they lost 0-4 to Portugal in the second game, so they were out. But they famously promised the host advancement by beating USA in the third game. This they did, although South Korea actually didn't need the help, because they beat Portugal in their third game to secure their own passage. Poland reached the World Cup again in 2006, so a bit of a strong period here, but it was the same result. 2 opening losses and out before the third game was played. In this case, they lost to Ecuador and tournament host Germany, and they beat Costa Rica in a meaningless third game since neither of them could advance. Now, they didn't reach the Cup in 2010 and 2014, so that ends their kind of deep history, but we'll move on to the recent history, and Connor will tell us about the World Cup 2018 campaign.
Yeah, so Poland came into qualifying as the 3rd seed in the qualifying group, despite having done far better than top seed Romania and also Denmark in Euro 2016. Poland then proved superior, winning all games except for lapses in an opening draw in Kazakhstan and a surprising 0-4 loss to Denmark. They won all their games against Montenegro and Armenia to finish first in the group.
Okay.
Poland's Robert Lewandowski scored 3 hat tricks in qualifying.
Wow.
And ended with 16 of Poland's 28 goals. Poland went into the World Cup with high hopes as they were the top seeded team in their group, but they were out after 2 games, losing to Senegal and Colombia. Their listless play even continuing against Japan in the 3rd match. They won that, but nevertheless finished last in the group. So that actually repeats a pattern for them of 2 losses and a win and failing to advance in the group stage.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, that's 2018, so at least they made that World Cup, and they also made this one. Let's see how they did it in their qualifying campaign.
So Poland were grouped with England. They were bested by England. England actually scored a late goal for a home win over Poland, but then Poland scored a stoppage time equalizer for a draw at home. Poland were also bested by 4th place Hungary, but they finished 2nd in the group stage due to consistency over Albania, Andorra, and San Marino, winning all games against them. So 2nd place in the group stage brought them to a regional playoff where they received a bye in the semifinals since they were due to meet Russia, who were disqualified for their invasion of Ukraine. They then met Sweden in the playoff final, whom they beat 2-0 to advance to the World Cup.
Okay. That is the World Cup. We'll take a quick look at the Euro Cup here with an overview. So it's actually amazing that they failed to reach the Euro Cup during that strong period in the 1970s and early 80s. 3 times in a row they came close to qualifying, including finishing tied with Netherlands in 1976. And then they finished 1 point behind Netherlands in 1980. And they were kind of unlucky during that period to have been grouped with the Dutch, who were also enjoying their period, their best period of World Cup soccer. Um, they also failed to qualify in the early 2000s despite reaching the World Cup twice in a row. So it took until 2008 for them to qualify for their first World Cup. For their first Euro Cup. But it did start a period of consistent qualification. Only in 2016, though, did they actually pass the group stage of a cup, and the quarterfinals there proved their best result in Euro Cup history. So a bit of a grim Euro Cup history there, Connor.
Yeah, very stark contrast to the World Cup.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, well, let's see if they could improve on that history in their Euro Cup 2020 campaign.
So in terms of qualification, Poland had a commanding first place finish in a relatively easy qualifying group. They dropped points in consecutive games in the middle of the campaign, losing in fourth place Slovenia and tying at home to second place Austria. But they nevertheless were 6 points better off than Austria for first place. Macedonia, Israel, and Latvia were the other teams whom Poland beat twice each. In the tournament, they lost to Slovakia in their opener, but tied Spain. They almost tied Sweden in their last game, coming back from 2 goals down. But even a tie would not have been enough. And they suffered a last-minute goal as it was to cap a humiliating tournament. Last place in the group stage, and only a single point for a team that had come in as a second seed in the group.
Yeah, so their bad fortune in Euro Cup continues. Well, let's take a look at how they've been doing in their recent games. They are playing UEFA Nations League games in June, and that'll continue into September. So maybe we should start with those.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many other games because of their playoffs, just a friendly with Scotland. But in their Nations League, they're in Group A. They opened with a 2-1 win over Wales, then lost heavily to Belgium, 1-6, tied the Netherlands, and then lost at home to Belgium. So they have a win, a draw, and 2 losses. Beating Wales, but not particularly competitive with with the other teams in the group so far.
Right, and as you said, as we've talked about, their qualifying playoff game with Russia was cancelled, and they were given a win. They replaced that with a game in Scotland, which they tied 1-1, and then they went on to play their qualifying game. So I don't have any games scheduled. There are no games scheduled, is what I mean. I guess teams may schedule games, so we'll update that in our October podcast. But as of now, they just have 2 Nations League games in September, and that's it. Yeah,
no other friendlies. And then
right.
In terms of their World Cup schedule, they start things off with Mexico, then play Saudi Arabia, and have Argentina in their last game.
Okay. Well, that's Poland, and our last team is Saudi Arabia. So we'll start off with a look at their participation and achievements. And sorry, Connor, I'm going to put you on the spot. When was Saudi Arabia's first game?
I'm trying to think when the English got there, because I think that is the tale. I'm going to say around the Second World War.
Yeah, no, this is a bit of a shocker. It's actually in 1957.
Oh.
Yeah, I was very surprised by that. They are latecomers to world soccer, participating only from 1978 in the World Cup, although they did enter regularly after that. They were not a member of the AFC, that's the Asian Football Confederation, for the Asian Cups from 1956 to 1972. They qualified for the 1976 version, but then withdrew, along with Thailand and North Korea, who had also qualified. For reasons unknown, but perhaps it has something to do with Iran hosting the tournament. They also withdrew along with several other countries from Kuwait 1980. So a bit of a patchy history in terms of participation, but let's see how they've done in terms of achievement.
So in terms of achievement, it is best to begin with the Asian Cup. They were dominant in Asia from their first completed entry in 1984. They won 3 of their first 4 cups, and were in the final for 6 of the first 7 up until 2000. From that time, their best result was second place in 2007. That strength was not reflected in World Cup play until 1994, when they qualified for their first World Cup and reached the round of 16. Though they've reached this cup several times since, that remains their best result on the world stage.
That's right. Just well, I actually did you know they had passed a World Cup group stage?
I did, actually.
Oh, did you? Well, I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. That's where I was going with it.
Yeah, well, I know partly because of my preparation for this and just kind of looking at them from the last World Cup as well. But yeah, still a bit of a surprise. I wouldn't have perhaps known had I not taken a bit of a look at them.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will take a look at their World Cup history, and it's shorter than the ones we've done before, but we'll begin with kind of an overview. So they appeared a weak team in World Cup qualification until 1994, when their strong Asian Cup form caught up. In 1994, they went through qualification undefeated and won 2 games in the group stage to reach the top 16. They reached the World Cup for the next 3 editions after, but they didn't again pass the group stage. In fact, they never won another game, but mustered only 2 draws in their 9 games over those 3 tournaments. Then in 2010, they didn't qualify, and in 2014, they failed to even reach the final round of qualification, bringing their once dominant reputation as giants in Asia into serious question. But we'll see soon how they fared in 2018. Okay, now the World Cup finals history is quite short, so I'm going to cover that. So despite good success in the Asian Cup in the 1980s, they never reached the World Cup in that period, and it took until 1994 to do so. However, they made the best of it when they did. Supposedly from the weakest region and perhaps underestimated, they challenged Netherlands in their opener, losing only 1-2, and that on a late goal at 86. They went on to beat Morocco and Belgium to finish second in the group and advanced to the round of 16. There they met Sweden at a peak in strength, and they lost 1-3. And that would be their best result ever, but they did reach the cup in the following 3 editions. In 1998, they lost 0-1 to Denmark in their opener, but 0-4 to France. They almost beat South Africa in the 3rd game, but suffered a late equalizer in the 4th minute of injury time. Even a win, though, would not have given them an advancing spot. It would only have given them 3rd place, but they finished last in the group. They had 2 goals of the tournaments, both having come on penalties. In 2002, they lost all 3 games, starting with a 0-8 thrashing at the hands of Germany. They lost to Cameroon and Ireland, exiting the tournament without even a goal. 2006 started with a 2-2 draw against Tunisia. They scored what seemed a winner at 84, only to give up an equalizer in injury time. Then they lost heavily to Ukraine 0-4 in the 2nd game and 0-1 to Spain in the 3rd game, finishing last in the group for the 3rd time in a row. Well, 2006 was the last time they reached the World Cup. And so we jump directly to their recent history now, looking at how they fared in the 2018 World Cup qualification.
Yeah.
So
I'll start with the qualification. Saudi Arabia received a bye in round 1 of 3, which is a qualifying round, and then comfortably won a round 2 group stage, suffering only away draws in Palestine and UAE, but winning games over Malaysia and East Timor. Despite being bested by Australia in round 3, they finished second ahead of them, exchanging home wins with group winner Japan. Their only other drop points was an away loss to UAE. It was a very competitive qualifying group with only a single point separating 1st place Japan and then 2nd place Saudi Arabia and Australia, who had 19 points each, one back of Japan. But Saudi Arabia avoided the playoff by virtue of a better goal difference. Interestingly, Saudi Arabia fired their manager between the end of qualification and the tournament. Yes, before and
yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yes, Saudi Arabia fired their manager between the end of qualification and the tournament. They went into the tournament as the second lowest ranked team, and hope sank further when they were thrashed by host Russia, who were the only lower ranked team in the tournament. However, a respectable 0-1 loss to Uruguay was followed by a comeback win over Egypt for third place in the group, and a good way to end the tournament, getting their first win in their last 4 tournament attempts.
Right. So, did you mention Mohamed Al Salawi?
No, do you want to speak about him?
Yeah. He scored 15 of Saudi Arabia's 45 goals in qualifying. So I think you had said 16 for Robert Lewandowski, but in fact, I'm not sure whether it was 15 or 16, but they were tied for the most goals in qualifying, along with a United Arab Emirates player, Ahmed Khalil. So look out for Mohamed Al Salawi in the cup. He's a big scorer for them. Okay, well, we move on to the World Cup 22 qualifying campaign.
All right, so they were not one of the bottom-ranked teams required to play in a preliminary round. So their campaign started in the round 2 group stage. It started with 2 away draws in Yemen, who are actually playing in Bahrain, and third place Palestine. But they won all their other games to finish first in the group stage, 5 points clear of second place Uzbekistan, who did not advance. In the final round, they won all games at home and lost only to Japan to finish first of 6 in the final round of qualifying. The only other point drops were in the form of ties in Australia and China. All in all, it was a comfortable and impressive qualification for another World Cup appearance.
Okay, well, I was on the wrong thing there, but yes, here they are in the World Cup for the second time in a row, and we'll be talking about their chances a bit later on. Actually, that's coming up soon, but we're going to take a look at their regional cup history, their Asian Cup history, just in an overview. So even though their football federation was established in 1956, they were not part of the Asian Federation until the mid-70s. They qualified for the 1976 Asian Cup, but withdrew from that and from the no, they didn't withdraw from the following cup. They just didn't enter in 1980. So 1984 became their first completed entry, and they immediately became a top Asian team, winning the title in 1984 and then again in 1988. Indeed, they came first or second until 2007, other than a ghastly year in 2004 when they were knocked out of the group stage. That seemed an anomalous year, actually, but in truth, it foreshadowed an end to their dominance. In 2011 and 2015, they were also knocked out of the group stage, and they seemed a second-tier team in the region, also failing, as we saw, to reach the World Cups in 2010 and 2014. They at least returned to the World Cup in 2018, but let's see if they return to form in the 2019 Asian Cup.
So 2018 World Cup qualifying made up the first 2 rounds of qualification for the Asian Cup, and their first place finish in round 2 ahead of the UAE and Palestine qualified them automatically for the regional tournament. They proved no match for the best teams, but were unlucky to face 2 finalists in the group stage, along the way. They started well, beating Lebanon and North Korea, though those were 2 of the weaker and the weakest of the lesser teams at the tournament. Then they met eventual champions Qatar in their final group stage game. Qatar beat them, which left Saudi Arabia second in the group stage. That led them to a tough round of 16 opponent in Japan, to whom they lost 1-0. and Japan would go on to lose to Qatar in the final.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, a bit ambivalent in terms of whether they've returned to strength. That was another fairly weak performance, but they are reaching World Cups. There's one other thing to talk about, the FIFA Arab Cup. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, so this was a tournament held among Arab countries, which covered Africa um, and the Middle East. It was kind of a warm up um, for the World Cup in Qatar. Qatar hosted, and it kind of took the place that the Confederations Cup used to. And a lot of teams took this tournament quite seriously. In the group stage, though, Saudi Arabia lost 1-0 to Morocco, tied Palestine, and then lost to Jordan. So they actually finished with just a single point and did not advance to the round of 16.
Okay, so as you said, a lot of teams took the tournament seriously. I actually think that Saudi Arabia was not one of them, and they sent kind of a weak team to that cup. So I don't think we can. That's a pretty poor performance, but I don't think we can use it as an argument to say they're a weak team here. Maybe the friendlies they're playing, which are never actually that revealing, but they may be even a bit more revealing than that Arab Cup. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, so they've had friendlies all at home and a couple games coming up at home as well. They beat Kuwait 1-0, but then lost at home to both Colombia and Venezuela. So both games 1-0. So they failed to score in those friendlies against their South American opponents.
Right. Well, it makes a bit more sense for them to play at home because the climate will be similar to
Yeah.
Qatar. Nevertheless, they do have upcoming games. Quite a few of them, in fact. They're hosted to play Ecuador and USA in September and Honduras in October. Those are all at home. And then right before the Cup, they've scheduled 3 games away, one in Iceland, another in Panama, and another in Croatia. So they'll be getting some good air miles out of that, hey?
Yeah. And then in terms of their schedule, they start with arguably their toughest match against Argentina and then play Poland and Mexico after that.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the historical part of the tournament. And we are going to just do a summary of each team and a look at their form coming into this cup before we just to kind of remind people of all we've talked about. And so let's begin by talking about Argentina. So in terms of a summary of Argentina, their greatest periods in the Copa America did not match their greatest periods in the World Cups. It's a shame that a strong period in the 1950s, as far as regional tournaments go, saw them not participating in 2 World Cups during that time and doing poorly on their return in 1958. Their best period in the World Cup, their 2 titles in 1978 and 1986, actually coincided with their worst period in South America, knocked out at the group stage 3 times in a row from 1975 to 1983. Second place and a hungry search for a title was their defining feature in the new millennium, a title to justify the greatness of Lionel Messi. 4 out of 5 second place finishes in Copa Americas from 2004 to 2016, and also second place in the 2014 World Cup was teeth-grindingly frustrating for them. A round of 16 finish in 2018 in the 2018 World Cup and third place in Copa America 2019 drew them even further from their title dream. Their last one now in the distant past of the 1993 Copa America. But in 2021, they got it and did so in Brazil to add a measure of glory. They can now go forward unhaunted and may prove the better for it as their strategy seemed to rotate around Messi a bit too much over the previous decade.
Argentina remain a very strong team and are better than their record, which can only be described as a drought in recent years. Since a successful period in the early 90s, second place in the 1990 World Cup and Copa America wins in 1991 and 93, they have had no titles to boast about up until that 2021 Copa America. Aggravatingly, they finished second in 4 of the 5 Copa Americas from 2004 to 16, and second in the 2014 World Cup. Internal team strife in 2018 led to an exit at the round of 16 in the World Cup and put in doubt that Messi will ever gain that recognition. Though the team controversy subsided in 2019, a third-place finish in a struggling 2019 Copa America made it 26 years since their last Cup win, again up until 2021, and this time, inarguably, or perhaps Messi's last World Cup, they will still strive for this elusive title.
Yeah, a Copa America is good, but a World Cup is what they always wanted. So, yeah, a bit of a bit of repetition there in the summary of Argentina. But let's move on to our summary of Mexico, and I'll do the historical summary, and Conan will talk a bit more about recent form. So Mexico are a middling team at the world level, and one of the top 2 teams, if inconsistently so, in their own region. At the world level, the only time they passed the group stage of the World Cup before 1994 was the 2 times they hosted. And their consistent round of 16 finishes since 1994 aptly describes their level. It's supported by their results in Confederation Cup and Copa America appearances, which average out to quarterfinal finishes. By these measures, they had a peak in the 1990s with second place finishes in both, as well as 3 Gold Cup titles in a row in their own region. They have generally prized these competitions above regional ones, sending, for example, their A team to the 2017 Confederations Cup and a B team to the 2017 Gold Cup. That became a concern for CONCACAF, who after 2016 didn't allow them to participate in the Copa America, as they had done consistently from 1993. Perhaps Mexico was overestimating themselves as needing better competition than their region could provide. Since 2002, they only once qualified as the top team in the region. And in 2014, they finished 4th, requiring an intercontinental playoff to reach the Cup. In the Regional Cup too, in 5 of the 12 editions from 2000, they failed to reach the final of the Gold Cup. Nevertheless, they are on average the top team in a relatively weak region.
Yeah, since 2011, the regional title has alternated back and forth between Mexico and the United States, like clockwork. It is not necessarily the case that they come second when USA comes first, as their 2 semi-final exits in 2013 and 2017 show. But they won in 2019 and USA won in 2021, with Mexico coming second. And their form is generally consistent, as their long string of round of 16 finishes in the World Cup shows. It is concerning, though, that the USA won the 2021 Gold Cup with essentially their B team, and Mexico's A team required a late winner over Canada in the semifinal of that cup. And they came second to Canada in World Cup 2022 qualifying, where they were 3rd from the halfway point up until the final game, where they pipped the USA for second. So they may be at a slight lull in their form. This seems to be the case with their squad, a very solid team, but with no outstanding talents. However, this has usually been the case for Mexico. So overall, their current form does not seem significantly different from their regular form.
All right, that is Mexico in a nutshell, and we will put Poland in a similar nutshell with the summary. So in summary, their only Euro qualifications have been in the last 4 cups, and that strong period is ongoing for them, accompanied by World Cup qualifications in 2018 and in 2022. It's an oddity that they didn't reach the Euro Cup during their other strong periods, especially in the 1970s and 80s. That differs from their current period of strength. That was defined by spectacular results, as we said, winning 11 of 12 group stage games over 4 cups and reaching the final stages every time and finishing third twice. The current period and their brief period of World Cup strength in the early 2000s, though, is defined simply by reaching the Cup with greater consistency. And only in Euro 2016 did they pass a group stage game. Did they pass a group stage?
Yeah, the current period of, I guess we'll call it consistency rather than strength, it's ongoing, maintained by reaching the 2022 World Cup. But though it is an impressive period in terms of strong qualification runs, it is bland and disappointing in the actual tournaments. 2018 saw the same pattern as in the 2002 and 2006 World Cups, knocked out after 2 losses with a meaningless win in the third game. Only 2016 met the expectations of fans, undefeated in the group stage and 2 penalty shootouts in the final stages. 2020 saw them earn only a draw at the European Championships. Recent and current Euro Nations League play sees them beyond their depth with the top teams and competitive only with second-tier teams like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Wales.
All right. Well, the fourth team is Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia was late in joining world and Asian competitions, but they were dominant in Asia from their first completed entry in 1984. They won 3 of their first 4 cups, and they were in the final for 6 of the first 7 until 2007. That strength was not reflected in World Cup play until 1994, when they qualified for their first cup and reached a round of 16. A terrible performance in the 2004 Asian Cup was the first sign of trouble, and though they had some success after that, they entered a very poor period from 2010 to 2018, failing to reach the World Cup in 2010 and 2014, and falling at the group stage of the 2011 and 2015 Asian Cups.
They recovered somewhat from that long slump, which threatened to define them as a second-tier team, by qualifying for the World Cup in 2018 and beating Egypt in it. Passing their group stage of the 2019 Asia Cup was an improvement, but hardly a return to their dominance in Asia as they were knocked out at the round of 16. A solid qualification for the 2022 World Cup, finishing first ahead of Japan and Australia, argues their return to being a top-tier team in Asia, but confirmation is needed in the form of a competitive World Cup campaign and a better result than top 16 in the 2023 Asian Cup. Oh, you're just on mute there, Kev.
Sorry, that summarizes the team. So now let's get into the meat of things a little bit, and we'll begin with the rankings. How are they ranked?
So Argentina are currently third in FIFA and second in ELO. So they've actually moved up a little bit from their fourth place ranking in FIFA at the time of the World Cup draw.
Yeah, that'll be that'll be due to their 2021 title, I guess.
That's right. So a top 3 team in both rankings, with the 2 systems agreeing there.
Right. In 2018, they were as low as 11th. But they've been first in the world in 2016 and also in 2008. Probably part of the reason they were so hungry for a title to justify it.
Mm-hmm. So Mexico is a pot 2 team. They're ranked 12th in FIFA and 22nd in ELO, so about 10 spots lower there. And they were 9th at the time of the draw, so they've slipped a little bit. And kind of that 12th place in FIFA rankings is kind of where they've been for much of the last several years.
Yeah, they have. That's quite a difference, 10 points at the top. Do you feel more like they're 12th or more like they're 22nd?
Yeah, I mean, we generally trust the ELO rankings a bit more. I mean, I perhaps lean kind of in between. I mean, Mexico are very strong in their region, but But, comparing them against European and South American teams, you kind of have to see. I think the fact that they're a top 16 team in the World Cup, but no further, kind of argues for them being roughly around 16th.
Oh, well put. Yeah. All right. How about Poland?
Poland are the pot 3 team, and they're 26th in FIFA and 28th in ELO. So that has them 14 spots behind Mexico in the FIFA rankings, but just 6 spots behind them in ELO. And yeah, Poland have fluctuated a little bit. They were 6th in the FIFA rankings in June 2017, but 76th in 2013. So they've bounced around, but have settled recently, kind of at that 26 mark.
Yeah, those rankings kind of were followed by the ELO rankings, but not as dramatically. Rather than 6th in 2017, they were 13th. And instead of 76, they were 53rd, which is still bouncing around quite a bit.
Yeah, and then Saudi Arabia, they're the pot 14. They're 53rd in FIFA and 56th in ELO. So they are one of the lower ranked teams coming into this World Cup.
All right. Well, I'll summarize by saying that according to FIFA rankings, it's pretty clearly divided, with Argentina, Mexico, Poland, and Saudi Arabia, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, quite separated. However, ELO rankings kind of, judging by the rankings, predicts a bit of a battle for 2nd there between Mexico and Poland, since they have Mexico only slightly ahead of Poland.
All right. Well, let's look at the head-to-head record. And we'll start with Argentina versus Mexico. And Argentina has dominated, winning 6 of their 8 games, tying 1 and losing just 1 other.
Yeah, they've met in some pretty significant games. The 1993 Copa America final, Argentina won that. And we saw in the histories that they met in the 2006 and the 2010 round of 16. Basically, Argentina have won anytime they've met in the World Cup, and Mexico's only results were in Copa Americas a long time ago.
Yeah, in terms of Argentina versus Poland, they've met twice, and they've each won 1 game. That was in Poland's period of strength in the 1970s, Poland winning in 1974 World Cup and losing in the 1978 World Cup.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a false measurement. We'd have to say that they're not quite even over the course of history, but were fairly even during that time.
Yeah, and then Argentina have never met Saudi Arabia, so this will be their first competitive meeting. Mexico versus Saudi Arabia. Mexico has the edge. They've won their 2 meetings.
Yeah, they were both in 1997 and 1999 Confederations Cup, so I wouldn't say they're that relevant, other than the fact that Mexico won 5-0 and 5-1, so proving very superior there.
Poland and Saudi Arabia have never met, but then Poland and Mexico have met once, which Poland won. That was also in the 1978 World Cup group stage, Poland winning 3-1.
Okay, well, Poland's coming out looking a bit better than their standard thing, since most of the times they've met these teams were at a period of strength for them. Let's move on to the odds. Now, we're not promoting betting here, but rather just thinking of what other people, how other people are seeing this. So I've taken 3 or 4 websites and kind of averaged the results over those things. And you want to take us through the odds? We decided to do odds to qualify. We also did odds to win the group, but we thought odds to qualify would be better to talk about here.
Yeah. So Argentina are the heavy favorites, given a 93% chance to advance from the group stage. Mexico and Poland are very, very close. Mexico at 52.8 and Poland at 52.4%. So virtually nothing between them in terms of the odds makers. Mm-hmm. And then Saudi Arabia are the outsiders at just 14%.
Okay, well, it looks like the odds makers are going along with the ELO rankings rather than the FIFA rankings there. As far as the odds to win the group are, just one comment to make there, and that's Argentina is given a 70% chance, 69.7, to win the group. What do you think? Does that represent their chances of winning the group?
I'm a little surprised at that much lower. I mean, I think Argentina, would be favorite to advance, but yeah, obviously they see some room for slip up, or perhaps Argentina not coasting through the group, which I think is reasonable.
All right, well, let's get into the discussion a bit. Um, um, do you want to just start off by talking about Argentina?
Yeah, so I mean, Argentina are the pot one team. They're ranked very highly in the world. So on the face of it, they should win the group. Um, but they haven't been a team that's um, always performed to the best of their abilities. I mean, they have got the finals. They have the recent Copa America Cup win, but they do drop points along the way. And then look at the last World Cup, they opened with a tie against Iceland and were very lucky after losing heavily to Croatia to get past Nigeria. So they're not an infallible team, though they can be good in the later stages of the tournament. But overall, I would think that they will win this group, but not by winning all three games.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I see Argentina a bit like England. I actually don't see any of these teams posing a threat to them because I think Argentina is the strongest team by quite a margin. I think the only danger to Argentina is themselves. And in some tournaments, I would say by overconfidence or nerves. But this time, I think because they won that 2022, they have earned that title for Messi. I really kind of feel that they'll be a bit more relaxed this tournament, and they won't be upset by overconfidence or infighting or anxiety or nerves. I actually think this is going to be a really good tournament for Argentina.
All right. In terms of Mexico and Poland, how do you see those two faring? Do you see them? Do you see Mexico having an edge like FIFA does, or do you see them fairly close?
No, I don't. I think that FIFA ranking is way too generous. I mean, they didn't finish first in their region. They lost to America's B team in the 2021 Cup. And in terms of squad, I don't see any top players. I mean, they have very good players, Herrera, Jimenez. They have a number of good players, Irving Lozano, but they don't seem to have some of the stars that they've gone into other tournaments with, and I think it's showing in their results. How about you on Mexico?
Well, it's an interesting point about Mexico because when you're looking at stars, you have obviously Lionel Messi and you have Robert Lewandowski,
Yeah,
who many people felt should have been given what should have been awarded the best player of the year for FIFA when it was canceled during COVID just recently. And he's, moved to Barcelona now, but has had unbelievable form with Bayern Munich. So in terms of stars, you give Poland the edge and I guess an individual star power. But that said, despite Lewandowski and despite the buckets of goals he scored in qualifying, Poland have struggled at major tournaments, even with him. Um, and Lewandowski personally hasn't scored a lot of goals in finals tournaments. So in a way, you could argue that they perhaps underperformed with a player of that quality. When I look at these two teams, um, I do give Mexico the edge over Poland. And I just think you have a Poland team that kind of underperforms in major tournaments compared to a Mexico team that is very consistent in tournaments, often getting to the final in their region. I mean, getting to the round of 16, the last 7 tournaments here. So I'm going to give Mexico the edge with their consistency.
yeah, I agree with a lot with what you said there. I mean, Poland's strength, what we call the good period has been kind of consistency in qualifying, and really that means consistency over kind of equal or lesser teams. They're really not a match for bigger teams, so I don't think they'll challenge Argentina at all. And as you say, if Mexico's a better team, they may not challenge them. And they have been so bland and uninspiring in all but the Euro 2016 Euro Cup that I think that's kind of the norm for them. So despite having a great player by Lewandowski, I mean, he just doesn't seem to, whatever it is, like the team just doesn't service him well, or there's just some problem with their motivation. They never do well in the cup. So I actually think that not only will Poland probably not challenge Mexico, but I think they're in a bit of danger from dark horses Saudi Arabia. What do you make of Saudi Arabia?
I think they qualified impressively. Topping a group with Japan and Australia is quite good. But I really don't see Saudi Arabia posing a threat. I think this is actually a difficult group for them. They were in a fairly easy group in the last World Cup with Russia, Egypt, and Uruguay, and they got a late win. It was a late goal. Their other goal was a penalty, so it wasn't like they were convincing against Egypt in that win. And I do see them a little bit out of the depth. I don't, looking over the past decade, with a couple World Cup failures and poor performances in the Asian Cups, I don't really see any signs.
But Elfenard, Connor, Elfenard.
You'll have to explain that.
Hervé Renard is their manager.
Hervé Renard, yes. Hervé Renard, yeah, sorry, your French accent. He is a wild card. He's a spectacular international manager who took Morocco to the last World Cup, coached Ivory Coast, Zambia. So yeah, perhaps he's their I would say second biggest asset, because the fact that the tournament is being played in Middle East, is perhaps an advantage. It won't quite be a home game, but it'll feel more like that. So maybe I'm being a bit unkind to them or discounting their home field advantage. But overall, I don't really see them posing a threat here.
Yeah, I don't know. I do give them a bit more credit than you seem to be giving them. I'm kind of joking about Hervé Renard, but he does seem to bring the best out of teams.
Yeah.
And I do think that's a plus. And as you say, I think the climate will be a plus for them, as if they're playing at home. In terms of weather, I'm not sure in terms of culture, but they are kind of back to their best in Asia. Like, that was a very impressive qualification over Japan and Australia, and they have been much stronger in the past. I mean, they are kind of coming out of a very weak period. So a lot of people, maybe that's all they'll know about Saudi Arabia, is that, oh yeah, I've never even kind of heard of them in terms of soccer. Whereas they were like 3 Asian Cups in a row, consistent World Cup qualifications, one of the first Asian teams to pass the group stage in 1994. I'm not saying that they're going to overpower or be competitive here. I just think they're a bit of a dark horse that other teams may take for granted.
I could agree with that dark horse statement, especially being at home. Pretty much all their players play domestically, so they all play in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And you're right, Hervé Renard is a great manager who tends to get the best out of his players. So they're not to be taken lightly, but and they might be competitive at the game level. However, I just don't see it at the group level, them really threatening to advance.
I wonder if they're kind of going for a feint. I really wondered about that, sending their B team to a tournament in Qatar. You think they, and because most of them do play in Saudi Arabia, it's right next door. Why would they not send their A team to the 2021 Arab Cup? And I think it may be because they didn't want to tip their hand, or even more strategically, they wanted to look weak coming into this cup, because I think one of their greatest strengths may be the element of surprise.
Yeah, well, that would be a bold strategy for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you have wavered, you have dodged, you have ducked, but now I'm going to put you to the test and say, what do you say? Who is going to win this group?
Um, I'm quite confident in my ordering of this group, or maybe not confident in that. I'm not sure I'm right, but it's clear cut enough to me. I see Argentina first, Mexico second, Poland third, Saudi Arabia fourth. So that does go with the pot rankings. I see some points dropped. Maybe Saudi Arabia doing well to get a point, perhaps against an underperforming Poland. But in terms of the closest battle, which I think is for second place, I see Mexico as the stronger and, more importantly, the more consistent team.
All right. Well, I'm going to shock you here because I'm going to say Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Poland.
Saudi Arabia ahead of Mexico and Poland.
I do. I realize I'm being a bit contrarian and perhaps overestimating their chances, but I think they have a lot of small things going for them. And I think playing the cup in the Middle East will be very important to them. But it's also just because to me, Mexico seem a bit weaker. I mean, you talk about their consistency and their top 16 finishes. To me, they seem a bit weaker than in the past when they've earned those results. So I do think the top 16 will be a bit tougher for them to reach here. And Poland, they're just perennially flat. So again, of course, both of those teams could play well in the cup because they have the talent to. But I'm just gonna say Saudi Arabia because I think they have a few things moving in their direction.
Yeah. Well, I don't agree with you, but I will say in the 2002 World Cup in Asia, both South Korea and Japan performed very well. They were at home. Saudi Arabia are very, very close to home. So, it's possible we could see a bit of a repeat of that tournament, if Saudi Arabia and particularly Qatar perform well.
I gotta say, I hope so because I always find the tournaments outside of Europe a lot more interesting than the tournaments in Europe. They throw up more surprises, and teams from various regions tend to do a little bit better. So I'm excited about this World Cup for that reason.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast, and thanks for listening. And those who are unfamiliar with our podcast might want to keep listening for some information for further listening. But if you're familiar with our podcast and you know about the other series that we've done, it might be a good time to turn off. So we'll say goodbye to you people and then stay on the line for those who want to hear about the other podcasts that we've done. Okay, further listening. We've done 9 different series of podcasts if you're interested in a deeper dive. Some of the information may be dated, but some of the histories focus on different aspects of the team histories, so it can help you to get to know teams more intimately.
Yes, as mentioned, this is our 10th series, and we have done at least one series on every region except Oceania. We have files for that region too, and we'll do one down the road so as not to leave them out. But let's go region by region.
Right. So Europe, our first series was a group by group podcast on the teams of Euro 2020. That was played in the summer of 2021. And for South America, we also did a group by group podcast on the teams in Copa America 2021.
For North America, we have done 3 series on CONCACAF. The first was a group by group podcast on the teams in the 2021 Gold Cup. That included a look at Qatar. The second was a preview of the 8 teams in the final round of World Cup CONCACAF qualifying. That came with our first player series, where we went team by team through the players. The third was an update halfway through that qualification.
Yes, and for Asia, we did a group by group podcast on the 12 teams in the final round of World Cup qualifying, and that included a deep dive into each team's World Cup qualifying history.
We have done 3 series on African teams. The first was a group by group podcast on the 24 teams in the 2021 African Cup, played in early 2022. The second, done around the same time, was a team by team series on the players for each of those teams. Third and finally, we have recently concluded a series on almost all teams in Africa, a group-by-group examination of the 12 qualifying groups for the 2023 African Cup. This included a deep dive into their African Cup history, which was quite extensive. This provides a look into some of the lesser teams that rarely even qualify for the African Cup.
Right, and we realize that not everyone is interested in the level of detail that we go into. So starting from that series, the 2023 African Cup series, we're editing our media casts into shorter versions. Generally, for groups and teams, this will just be a summary and discussion segments of the longer podcasts. And for the player ones, just the sections on the squad's overall strength and a list of the main players that we expect to reach the competition. So that's usually 2 or 3 groups per episode.
Yes, otherwise each long version of the series contains a deep dive into the matter at hand. So if it's African Cup qualification, for example, it's a deep dive into the team's history of African Cup qualification. Or if it's the World Cup qualification, a deep dive into each team's history in qualifying for the World Cup.
Right, and all of those podcasts can be found in our library at soccerphiles.captivate.fm. That's Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And we also provide a link to our website and other relevant material in the show notes for each media cast. And in general, to find us, you can type Soccer Files Canada into Google, and it's easy to find your way from there. Or just check out the show notes for this or any of our media casts, and it'll be easy to navigate from there.
Okay, see you in our future media casts.